One of the things that I like best about Desmos is that it's engaging, but it's also collaborative. The students are talking with one another while they are solving solutions, and it's a little bit out of the box. So they're working together, and believe it or not, that activity was already created for me. I didn't have to create that. And there is a whole library full of lessons just like that, regardless of what math you teach. So I just want to reflect back on our learning targets so we can make sure that we stay on task with that, because sometimes I know I get really excited when I'm talking about Desmos. So our expectation is I will explore Desmos so that I can use it to create engaging hands-on experiences for my students this upcoming year. Think back to the challenges that you may have just experienced with that Desmos activity. I know that I struggle, especially with that first activity where it's asking me to make the lines parallel. And I'm like, oh, I've totally done that. And I get it wrong every time. Because my eyes, I see it straight, but I don't know. But you're working together, and that's really what math is, working together to find those solutions. So I know I'm preaching to the choir about that. Let's transition away from the why to now how. How do we find Desmos activities for our class, and how do we assign those? So you want to go to the website, desmos.com, and make sure that you're signed in. If you've never signed in before, you can sign in with Google. It's completely safe. It won't hurt anything. And remember that everything is completely free, so you don't have to worry about any payment or anything like that. Once you're signed in, you will scroll down to where it says Teachers, and you can click Browse Activities. The first thing that we will want to do is click Manage Classes, because you all will have students that you want to make sure that you have enrolled inside of your Desmos class. I don't, so I just made mine be open to anybody. But you will click Add New Class. And since most of us I know are using Google Classroom now, you can click this import from Google Classroom, and any student that is enrolled inside of that Google Classroom will be filtered into your Desmos. So that's really cool. If you're working this summer and you want to have just a class that you put all of your activities in just to play around with, you can also click and just give it a name. But if you select Google Classroom, allow it to talk to your Google. Allow. And it will put grades automatically from Desmos into Google Classroom, I believe. So that's one thing that you can, they'll talk to one another. And then you just select the class, and it would pull the students automatically. Now, I don't have any classes where I have actual students enrolled, but yeah. It will ask you how you want your posts from Desmos to be posted into Google Classroom, and you can pick any of these. I would probably pick post immediately, just because it makes things be a little bit faster, but that's totally a preference. That's up to you. And you can see the student names that are in there just by clicking on the roster. I would recommend having a class per class that you teach if you have multiple students throughout the day. All right, so once you have your classes set up, I'm going to click Desmos again up here in the corner so I can get back to that screen. And you'll see that there's featured collections over here. You could also search for an activity. But let's say that I'm teaching quadratic functions, and I click down here. I can scroll through and look at all of these lessons that go along with quadratic functions. If I find one that I like, I can click on it and I can click student preview so I can see this as a student, and I can even go through there and model for the students if I wanted to, or I could make a screencastify video to model it, and I would just type in my responses and I can go through this as a student. So that's pretty cool. If I'm happy with that session and I want to assign it to my students, I'm just going to click assign, and I'll pick which class or classes that I want for that to go into. And then I just click assign. And the students will, if it went to my Google Classroom, it would automatically post to my assignment page. I can also click this down arrow and get a single session code if I don't want it to be posted inside of Google Classroom for whatever reason. And then notice that I have a code here now. If I click student link, it'll tell me that students need to go to student.desmos.com and type that code in order to access it, or I could just give them the link. Either way. At any point in time, I can go to manage classes and I can see all of my assigned activities for each class. And if I click on one of those, I'm going to be able to see any of the sessions that I have assigned to that class. And if I click on the title of one of those classes, I'm going to be taken to what's called the teacher dashboard, where I can see my students working in real time and I can be watching their screens while they work. So if I click teacher, all of my student responses are going to be over here as they're working, and I can click on each slide to see their responses. And as a teacher, I can see their names. If I click anonymize, it's going to give them random mathematician names. So that's pretty cool. So they're going to be trying to figure out who is who, but they won't be able to say, oh, that's Stella's slide because it says Stella on it. You can also transition from like a student pace session to a teacher pace. So if you do not want your students to be working at their own pace, but you want to kind of guide them through, you can change that at any time by clicking pacing and clicking on the slide that you want your students to be on. So they're going to be restricted to just that screen until you either stop that or go to the next screen, and then they're going to be restricted to that. You can also do a catch and release by clicking the pause button. This will say, sorry, your activity has been paused by your teacher. So you can kind of explain something if you start to notice that students are having a challenge with a certain screen or a certain activity. And you can even up here in the corner, switch it over to student and project that while their screen is paused to walk them through. So if you're seeing a lot of misconceptions, that's always a pretty cool activity in order to do. And you can even look at teacher moves and sample responses. So you have a few different activities there to help you as you're trying to assist your students learn the content. So let's say that we are looking for an activity with angles. I could go up to the search and type in angles, and I can look through here to find a resource that I want that sounds like it might match what I'm trying to teach. So I like this one, and I'm going to preview it as a student. This one's got a card sort. Okay. And I can just scroll through these to see or to determine if this is appropriate for my class and if it matches what I want, I can use it. I can also go up here to the top, and there is a teacher guide that comes with all of these activities that I can look at and just read through. It kind of gives you something that you could print out, so as you're teaching, you can have your notes jotted down, or you could give this to the students, and they could jot down their notes. So I like that. If you click the three dots here, you can share the activity with a co-teacher or with somebody else. If you go down here, you can click copy and edit, and that's going to allow you to delete some of the slides out if you really like an activity, but you don't like what one of the cards says. You can click the X button and delete that card. Opposed to just deleting, you can also add activities. So if you click the plus sign, you can come over and you can type a note in. You can have a sketch, a table, check boxes, and you can have the students do any of those functions right there. If you do edit an activity, you just click publish, and it will give you a link to your activity. And then you would just assign it whenever you're ready. So there's tons and tons and tons of things on there. There's no easy way to search for a specific standard, but if you look up the vocabulary, you can modify those. In the next section of this PD, I'm going to give you some time just to explore and try to find some resources that you think you could use with your students.